I, 28F, got married to my longtime boyfriend Dexter, 29M, last year. We dated for 6 years before finally tying the knot. Our relationship started in college when we met through mutual friends at a campus event. Dexter was studying engineering while I was pursuing my degree in business administration. We clicked instantly and have been inseparable since then. For context, my younger sister Aria, 24F, has always been competitive with me since childhood. Whatever I did or wanted, she had to do it first or better. This behavior started when we were very young. When I was 7 and joined ballet classes, 3-year-old Aria threw tantrums until our parents enrolled her too. When I joined the school basketball team in 8th grade, she suddenly developed an interest in basketball and joined too, despite never showing any interest in sports before. When I started learning piano at 15, she insisted on taking piano lessons and practiced extra hours just to outshine me at the annual recital. This pattern continued through high school. When I got straight A's in my sophomore year, Aria studied day and night until she got straight A's plus extra credit in all her classes. When I got accepted into the state university with a partial scholarship, she worked herself to exhaustion to get into an Ivy League school with a better scholarship. Our parents always encouraged this behavior, treating Aria as their golden child who could do no wrong. When we were kids, if I complained about Aria copying everything I did, my parents would say I should be flattered that my little sister looked up to me so much. As we got older, they praised her relentlessly for everything while my achievements were often overlooked or treated as expected. They spent thousands on her Ivy League education while I had to work part-time jobs to help pay for my state university tuition. When I started dating Dexter in college, it didn't take long for Aria to find out about him through social media. Within months, she started dating his younger brother Kenneth, 26M. It felt like she was trying to copy my life yet again. Kenneth was still in his final year of high school then, and their relationship seemed forced from the start. But our parents thought it was adorable that the sisters were dating brothers. Over the years, Dexter and I built a solid relationship. We supported each other through college, our first jobs, and the struggles of early adulthood. When we moved in together after graduation, our parents disapproved, saying we were living in sin. But when Aria moved in with Kenneth right after he finished high school, they called it romantic. Last year, when Dexter and I announced our engagement, my grandparents were overjoyed. They had been waiting for their first great-grandchild, and naturally, everyone assumed we would be the ones to give them that joy since we were getting married. My grandmother even gave me her antique cradle, saying she hoped to see it filled soon. This didn't sit well with Aria. She couldn't stand that I was getting all the attention for once. During our wedding planning, Aria tried multiple times to overshadow us. She pushed Kenneth to propose, but he wasn't ready. She suggested having a double wedding, which we firmly refused. She even tried to wear white to our wedding until our grandmother put her foot down. 2 months after our wedding, during a family Sunday dinner, Aria announced she was pregnant. Kenneth looked shocked and uncomfortable during the announcement, almost dropping his fork when she said it. Later, we found out through mutual friends that Aria had deliberately gotten pregnant without discussing it with Kenneth. She had stopped taking her birth control without telling him, just so she could have the first grandchild in the family. My parents were ecstatic about becoming grandparents. They completely forgot about our recent wedding and shifted all their attention to Aria's pregnancy. Every family gathering became about her baby shower plans or nursery ideas. My mother spent hours shopping for baby clothes while my father started setting up a college fund for the baby. My grandmother's antique cradle, which had been given to me, was suddenly moved to Aria's apartment because she needed it more. Kenneth confided in Dexter during a brother's night out that he wasn't ready to be a father. He had just started his career in IT and wanted to focus on that first. He felt trapped and manipulated but didn't know how to express this without seeming like a bad guy. But Aria manipulated him into staying, saying their baby needed both parents. She even moved in with him at his parents' house, claiming they needed to start living like a family. The real problems started after the baby was born. Aria quickly realized that having a baby wasn't just about getting attention and cute photos for social media. She struggled with the simplest tasks like changing diapers or waking up for night feeds. Kenneth tried his best but he was equally unprepared. They both started showing signs of being overwhelmed. Aria would call our mother at 3 a.m. crying about how hard everything was, and Kenneth started staying late at work to avoid coming home. Last week, my parents invited Dexter and me for dinner. We thought it was just a regular family dinner, but we were wrong. They had invited Dexter's parents too, which should have been our first red flag. As soon as we sat down, my mother started talking about how stressed Aria was with the baby. She mentioned how Aria needed time to figure out her life and career, and how the baby was making it difficult for her. She talked about how Aria's mental health was suffering and how she needed a break. Then came the shocking part. My parents suggested that since Dexter and I were stable, mature, and had been married longer, we should take the baby and raise it as our own. They said this way we wouldn't need to try for our own child, and Arya could focus on her life. I was speechless. They were asking us to take on someone else's child just because the actual parents weren't ready for the responsibility they had purposely taken on. Now both our families are pressuring us to reconsider. They keep saying we're being cruel by not helping Arya when she needs us. But Dexter and I refuse to let them manipulate us into taking on a responsibility that isn't ours. We didn't ask Arya to get pregnant, and we certainly didn't ask her to use her pregnancy as a way to steal attention. This isn't a used car we're talking about, it's a human being. You can't just hand off your child because parenting turned out to be harder than you expected. Update 1: The situation has gotten worse since my last post. Yesterday, Arya and my mother showed up at my workplace during lunch. I work at a marketing firm in the city, and they somehow found out my lunch schedule. They cornered me in the parking lot as I was walking to my car to grab lunch, demanding that I listen to their proposal. As soon as they approached me, I knew this wasn't a casual visit. Arya looked like she hadn't slept in days, with dark circles under her eyes. She started crying about how she and Kenneth weren't ready for parenthood and how they needed more time to figure things out. She kept saying she felt trapped and overwhelmed, that she never expected motherhood to be this hard. My mother then revealed their new plan. They suggested that Dexter and I could take the baby for a trial period of 6 months. If things didn't work out, they would find another solution. According to them, this would give Arya and Kenneth time to get their lives in order while ensuring the baby was well cared for. They had even drafted a temporary custody agreement, which they pulled out of their purse right there in the parking lot. When I refused again, Arya became hysterical. She screamed that I was ruining her life and that if I really loved her, I would help her. She accused me of being selfish and spiteful, saying I was refusing just to punish her. Several of my co-workers who were also on their lunch break stopped to stare at the scene she was creating. My mother tried a different approach. She brought up how I had always wanted children and suggested that maybe this was God's plan, that I was meant to raise Arya's baby instead of having my own. She said that sometimes blessings come in unexpected ways, and this could be our chance at parenthood. The audacity of her statement made my blood boil. I told them both to leave before I called security. Later that evening, around 7 p.m., they showed up at our house with Kenneth's parents. They had obviously planned this ambush, thinking they could pressure us if they all came together. Thankfully, Dexter was home. When they started their emotional manipulation again, he firmly asked them to leave. They refused, saying they wouldn't go until we agreed to their demands. Kenneth's mother started crying about how her son's life was being ruined, as if he had no part in creating this situation. My mother joined in, saying how Arya was suffering from postpartum depression and needed support. They made it sound like taking their baby was the only way to help her, completely ignoring the existence of actual medical and psychological help. That's when Arya dropped the bombshell. She and Kenneth had already booked tickets to Europe. They were planning to leave the baby with us whether we agreed or not. She thought if they just left the baby, we would have no choice but to take care of it. She even had a whole plan worked out. They would drop the baby off for babysitting and then catch their flight, leaving us with no option but to step up. I was shocked at her selfishness and immediately told her that if she abandoned her baby, I would call CPS. I made it clear that child abandonment was a crime, and I wouldn't hesitate to report them if they went through with their plan. This threat seemed to shake them all. My mother started begging us not to involve authorities, saying it would ruin Arya's life and future career prospects. Kenneth's parents joined in, promising to increase Dexter's inheritance if we agreed. They even offered to buy us a bigger house and a new car if we would take the baby. But we stood firm. We told them all to leave or we would call the police for trespassing. The look of shock on their faces when they realized we were serious was almost comical. They couldn't believe we wouldn't give in to their manipulation. Before leaving, Arya tried one last time to guilt-trip me. She brought up all the times I had said I wanted to be a mother, how I had always loved children, and how this could be my only chance at motherhood. She even suggested that my refusal meant I didn't really want to be a mother at all. I told her that wanting to be a mother didn't mean I wanted to enable her irresponsible behavior. I reminded her that she was the one who chose to get pregnant without thinking it through, and now she had to deal with the consequences of her actions. They finally left, but not before my mother warned us that we would regret our decision. She said that family should help family, and we were choosing to be cruel instead. Kenneth's father made a point of mentioning again that this would affect our standing in his will. After they left, Dexter and I sat down and had a long talk. We agreed that we needed to take steps to protect ourselves from future ambushes. We're looking into security cameras for our home and I've informed my workplace security about potential unwanted visitors. The whole situation has shown us just how far our families will go to force their wishes on us. It's clear they don't respect our boundaries or our right to make our own decisions. We're considering taking legal action if they continue with their harassment. Update 2: After the parking lot incident and the ambush at our house, I decided to talk to my grandfather. He has always been the voice of reason in our family, and I needed his perspective. I waited until I knew he would be alone, as my grandmother usually has her bridge club on Wednesday afternoons. I visited him at their house, bringing his favorite lemon cake from the bakery near their home. When I arrived, I found him in his study, reading the newspaper as he always does after lunch. He smiled when he saw me, but his expression quickly turned serious when he noticed my distress. I sat down in the old leather chair across from him, the same chair I used to sit in when I would visit him after school as a child. I told him everything from the beginning, about Arya's deliberate pregnancy, her inability to handle motherhood, and our parents' ridiculous demand that we take her baby. I explained about the ambush at my workplace and their attempt to force us into taking the baby by threatening to abandon it with us. As I spoke, I could see his expression changing from concern to anger. To my surprise, he already knew parts of the story but not the whole truth. My parents had told him a completely different version. According to them, Dexter and I had initially offered to adopt the baby but then suddenly changed our minds, leaving Arya devastated. They had painted us as the villains who were refusing to help family in need, making Arya out to be the victim of our cruelty. Grandfather was furious when he heard the real story. He couldn't believe that his own daughter, my mother, would try to force her older daughter to raise her younger daughter's child. He was especially angry about Arya's plan to abandon the baby with us and run away to Europe. He kept shaking his head, muttering about how this wasn't the way he and grandmother had raised their children. He immediately called my grandmother, despite her being at her bridge club. He rarely interrupts her social activities, so this showed how serious he considered the situation. When she arrived home 20 minutes later, he had me tell her everything again. By the end of my story, both of them were visibly upset. They both agreed that this situation had gone too far. Grandfather said he had watched over the years as my parents consistently favored Arya, but he had hoped they would grow out of it. Now he realized their favoritism had created this mess, enabling Arya's irresponsible behavior while expecting me to clean up after her. That's when grandfather made an unexpected offer. He owned several properties, including a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood about an hour away from our current home. The house had been a rental property for years, but the current tenants had just moved out. He offered to give it to us, saying we needed to distance ourselves from this toxic situation. At first, I tried to refuse. The house was worth at least $500,000, and it felt like too much to accept. But grandfather insisted. He said he had planned to leave it to me in his will anyway, and giving it to us now would help us escape this impossible situation. My grandmother agreed with him. She said that sometimes the only way to deal with toxic family dynamics is to create physical distance. She also pointed out that the house would give us space to start our own family when we were ready, without interference from either set of parents. They had their lawyer draw up the paperwork the very next day. The house was transferred to our names with the condition that we couldn't sell it for at least 5 years, not that we would want to. Grandfather said this condition was to prevent our parents from trying to pressure us into selling it and giving the money to Arya. When I got home that evening and told Dexter about my grandparents' offer, he was stunned. He had always gotten along well with my grandparents, but this level of support was unexpected. We spent the night discussing the offer and what it would mean for us. Moving an hour away would mean longer commutes to work, but the peace and distance it would provide seemed worth it. We decided to accept my grandparents' generous offer. The house needed some minor renovations before we could move in, but grandfather offered to cover those costs too. He said he wanted us to have a fresh start, free from the drama and manipulation we'd been dealing with. Update 3: It's been 3 months since we moved into the house my grandfather gave us. The distance has helped immensely in maintaining our sanity. The first thing we did after moving was change our phone numbers and only gave the new ones to my grandparents and a few trusted friends. We also installed a comprehensive security system with cameras, just in case anyone tried to show up uninvited. The house has become our sanctuary. We spent the first month repainting and making it our own. Dexter converted one of the spare rooms into his home office, and I turned another into a library, something I've always wanted. The large backyard gives us space to garden and relax, far from the drama we left behind. Arya and Kenneth never went to Europe. After realizing we were serious about calling CPS, they had no choice but to step up as parents. From what we've heard through mutual friends, they're both finally taking parenting classes and seeking help with childcare. Kenneth's parents stopped threatening us with the inheritance when they realized we weren't going to change our minds. My mother still tries to reach us through mutual friends. She sends messages saying we're being childish by moving away and that we're breaking up the family. She even tried to get my work email address to contact me, but thankfully my company respects employee privacy. Last week, she sent a letter through one of my cousins, claiming that Arya was depressed because of our actions and that we were being cruel by not helping her. My father hasn't made any direct attempts to contact us, but he's been telling everyone who will listen that we abandoned the family when they needed us most. He's trying to paint us as the villains in this story, but most people who know the whole truth understand why we had to distance ourselves. My grandparents have been our biggest supporters through all this. They regularly visit us in our new home and have made it clear to everyone that they stand by our decision. Grandmother even told my mother to stop trying to contact us until she can respect our boundaries. This caused a huge fight between them, but my grandmother stood firm. Dexter's parents eventually apologized for trying to manipulate us with the inheritance threat. They sent a letter acknowledging that they were wrong to try to force us into taking Arya's baby. However, we're still keeping our distance. One apology doesn't erase months of manipulation and pressure. The whole experience has shown us who truly cares about our well-being versus who just wants to use us to fix their problems. We're finally at peace with our decision and looking forward to starting our own family when we're ready, on our own terms. Last week, we heard that Arya and Kenneth are finally attending couples counseling and parenting classes. While we're glad they're getting help, we have no plans to reconnect anytime soon. The trust has been broken, and it will take more than a few months of good behavior to rebuild it. For now, we're enjoying our peaceful new life. We've made friends in our new neighborhood, joined a local community garden, and are planning to adopt a dog. Sometimes the best way to deal with toxic family dynamics is to create enough distance to build your own happiness. That's exactly what we're doing, and we have no regrets about our decision.